Call this meeting to order under the continuing resolution that we adopted for virtual meetings at the May 18th, 2020 meeting during the pandemic. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about the minutes of the last meeting?
Hello,
Hi, Kathy.
I've lost all of the sound from the meeting.
You have.
Okay, now I hear someone.
Okay. All right. Everybody else is hearing the sound, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
We can see you, Kathy.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Oh, you're a little bit frozen. It might be a bandwidth thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
probably is. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about the minutes of the last meeting that were the last draft that was posted? Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the?
so
Thank you, Kathy. I will take a vote verbally. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I,
No, thank you. The minutes are accepted. Are there any announcements from board members or from David?
I had one. I'm sorry, Lisa isn't here, but I just wanted to say that the Festival of the Book with Lisa moderating was very, very good with Jacqueline Woodson. Was really a nice, a fun evening. And another announcement is that the Friends are starting to do the Sunday bag sales again. And that will be, well, March 14th was the first. I think they have this date wrong on here, the 20th, anyway, it's Sundays. So it's March 14th, 26th, April 11th, and April 25th from 10 to 2 at Gordon Avenue. And they're also going to be exploring maybe doing it at another location as we move into the spring. Also, the Friends are exploring some fundraising ideas, and one that's come up that they're working on now with a little practice run is a virtual trivia night, book trivia or author trivia or whatever. And so you might want to be thinking about that and maybe get your book group involved. So when they do it, you can get a team and participate and have some fun on Zoom instead of all this fun we have every. But it should be, Prohl said that he's participated in a few and that they're fun and a good way for people to get together, raise a little bit of money in addition. So I'll keep you posted on that. I'm sure you'll hear as soon as they set it up. They're just going to do a trial run this month, see how it works. I think that's it. And it's beautiful out here in Louisa.
I have the book, the Friends of the Library. My daughter was really excited about it, but I didn't seem to find anything that advertised it. So
Really?
when she told me about it, I was really kind of shocked because I didn't see anything. She apparently got it from a friend. And then the other thing that my daughter wanted me to share with you all is that they've got the best people at the window at Northside. Said they are the friendliest and everything goes so well. And she's so excited about it. So she says, excellent report to the board.
Hey, Kathy, if you or anybody else is on Facebook, there's a Friends of JMRL Facebook group that I keep updated, and that has the announcements of all the sales and so forth. So if you or anybody else is on Facebook, just let me know and we can get you into that group.
Okay, I appreciate your offer, but I'm not a Facebook person. I apologize that I'm not one, but I don't do that. But thank you anyway.
And I'd be happy to, when I get the notices, I'd be happy, I'll make a note to myself to email you. So that when I get the notices of the sale, I'll email you.
And
You
the Festival of the Book, Kathy will also email if you sign up. That's how I hear.
I've been getting the Festival of the Book
And you
items.
did- Oh, okay, it was on it, the Jacqueline Woodson one was on there.
Okay. I didn't see that, and
Okay.
Again, Tony, I don't know whether you heard me, but would you mind just sending it to all the trustees when
No,
there's?
that'd be much more efficient. You're right. I'll do that. Thank you.
Great.
And along those lines, I've wondered in the past, the Friends have their own outreach channels that we're just describing, Facebook and so forth, but do we, for core Friends activities that benefit the library, of course, the library itself has channels with much larger reach. There's announcements, there's little banners on the homepage, there's blogs, there's newsletters and so forth. Do the Friends ever, get access, for core things like book sales to some of those channels, and would it make sense to put that in place?
Yeah, the library staff supports the Friends activities usually through either press releases or social media, less so on our main website.
Right.
But yeah, in the past we have done press releases for like the big sale or whatnot.
Right.
And a lot of social media around the little ones, which I believe we did this round as well. But yeah, there's certainly avenues there that we would love to work with the Friends to help spread the word.
Okay, so the types of things that Tony's talking about are on the Friends Facebook page, could also be on that seems to be pretty low impact to me. Low impact in terms of low cost to the library of reposting some of those on the main the main library page, which has a much larger reach, I imagine.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any comments or announcements?
I have one as well. Just a quick update. This, I think, might predate a couple of our board members here, but last year the board wrote a letter of endorsement for a capital project here in Scottsville. The town council applied for VDOT funding to do some sidewalk improvements, the scope of which would have gone past the library and connected it to the greater pedestrian infrastructure in the area. We got an update at the beginning of the month from VDOT on the project. We have been awarded the grant, but the amount that they've awarded us doesn't look like it'll cover the full scope of the project. So town council's in the process of deciding what to do with that, whether to proceed or to whittle down the scope. But even the whittled down scope would look at the library then as the main terminus on the project. So it's really become a matter of do they want the money to build a sidewalk to the library or not? And again, with cost overruns that the town would be responsible for and other questions that they've got, there are some issues around that they're looking at. So on the staff side, we've begun a little bit of outreach to the county on extra fundraising, and we might talk to the Friends of JMRL if we reach that point about that as well. But for now, the library to the sidewalk is still alive and puttering along. We'll see where that goes.
Thanks, Thomas.
Sure.
Anyone else? Are there any public comments, David?
I only see staff joined. So staff, if you have any comments to make now, please raise your hand. Going once. It doesn't look like it. No, Marcy.
All right, thank you. We'll start off today with continuing education on Bibliostat that David is going to do.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with a caveat that I'm going to show a lot of data that pops up. That's what JMRL has reported in the last few years. And I probably won't have answers about the specific data reported. So if you see a number and you have a question about that number, make a note or let me know now and I'll make a note and get back to you later. I'm just mostly wanting to talk about the process here. And it's a lot of data. It's 63 pages of data that gets reported every year. So I will have to go back to the folks that do the actual grunt work here. The goal here is to show you the process, what kind of information is available to JMRL, what kind that we're responsible for producing and what kind we can consume. JMRL's business manager is the primary responder to this document and ultimately responsible for all the data that's within. But Jerry relies on data collection from JMRL's collection and technology manager, our collections manager, circulation manager, adult and reference services manager, young adult services manager, and children's manager. So it's a big project. This is one of the biggest projects that Jerry is responsible for. We were just talking the other day about how in the fall, it's like the audit, the budget, and bibliostat all happen between September and December. So that's the busy time of year there. Okay, so this is a tool called bibliostat that is mandated that all the states, all the public libraries in the state of Virginia participate in annually. And it feeds data into a Baker and Taylor product called bibliostat, which we then have access to. This is the information that's used to determine what share of state aid libraries get across the Commonwealth, and also to make comparisons from library to library. The state attempts to normalize the data that they present out to the wider nation with other state libraries, because everybody's asking for slightly different things. And all this gets reported to the federal government, and the state gets money from IMLS occasionally. They use this data in order to get it. So I'm going to screen share if you don't mind. First, I'm going to share the information that JMRL is responsible for outputting. Does everybody see this? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. As I said, this is a 65-page document, but it is, of course, a web form. This output that I chose to look at here includes last year's responses to the questions and this year's responses. So the right column here is previous year. That's for fiscal year 2019. Current year is for fiscal year 20. So I've bookmarked the categories, the large categories that we're entering data into here. And I'll skip over big chunks of it just because there's so much data here. A lot of it, the first page, first few is just where are you, who do you serve, kind of demographic data. So borrower information, I called it. This is the number of registered users. Did we allow users to complete registration online prior to the pandemic? A lot of the questions changed this year to be pandemic specific. Has the library's registration files been purged in the last 3 years? That's a requirement that we have to meet. Number of users who borrowed materials, on and on. So just kind of information about who we're lending to and who has access to our collections. The second major category is about staffing information. So how many full-time employees do we have? How many of those are professional librarians? How many part-time employees? Number of hours in the work week, kind of information about how much staff JMRL has and how they're distributed. Kind of dovetailing off of that are the salary information. So starting with the director's salary and then some specific questions about a few specific positions. I'll try not to make anyone seasick. The assistant director, and then our department heads, and then a few down after that. So the state's looking to see, what's the kind of management structure of the organization and what kind of salaries are paid out for that. This is useful information to compare. Collection information. This is one of the first areas where there's a ton of work annually. The rest of these don't change that much from year to year. The addresses of the buildings, the phone numbers, things like that. Most of the salaries, they change, but it's not tremendously different. The collection fluctuates, goes up and down depending on what's happening that year. So this is a lot of work for Meredith and for Josh's department to get this information to Jerry. But again, just total numbers of how many books, how many teen books, how many children's books, how many books were cataloged, how many electronic books, and then some COVID specific things. Bound periodicals. It goes on and on and on about all sorts of any basically format that you can think of. They want to know what our collection is and what we put into it in the past year. So on the flip side of that is circulation info. So how did these things go out? Bunch of COVID questions. And then just total circulation. You can see, of course, JMRL was down last year because of being effectively not open for large chunks of Q4 in the beginning of the pandemic, and then offering curbside after that. But breakdowns by what types of materials checked out, by children's books, by young adult books, and then it gets into other very specific categories, ebooks. You can see the ebook jump there, which of course we were well aware of. And then another output they're interested in is programming information. So there's all sorts of questions about total persons held, programs held on or offsite. How many were for adults? How many were for teens? Same types of things there. How many virtual programs we did this year? So of course, there's no data from last year. And I can make this document, this document is available publicly to everyone, but I can send it around for those of you that want to look at the entire 65 pages of it. E-resource usage is the next category. It's not going. And then technical offerings. So the e-resource usage was more to do with databases rather than downloadable materials, which are considered part of collections. The technology is just like, what are we offering? What's our ILS? How many internet computers are we offering for staff, for the public? What kind of Wi-Fi systems do we have? What kind of speeds do we have at our various locations? Just collecting all that data. Funding, again, this one is pretty straightforward every year. You know, we take a look at the budget. Jerry just transfers over. Here's how much each jurisdiction is paying for JMRL. The flip side of that, of course, is expenditures. And here's where maybe the most work has to happen to break up into very specific categories, how money is spent out. So we'll look, for example, at the collections section. So how much local money is spent on materials versus state aid. How much is spent on, that's just books, how much is spent on newspapers, how much is spent on electronic devices, those types of things. So this is a good double check for JMRL as well to, you know, make sure that this information is available and that it's there for the state, but it's also there for the public if they want it. And then the end is branch information, which is pretty static. How big is your branch? You know, did it get any additions this year? So that doesn't change all that often, but this year we were able to add information about the Nelson Memorial Library, the square footage change, things like that. Here's the central library, who's in charge of it, you know, what are the hours and whatnot. Okay, so this document is the result of a couple months worth of work in the fall, goes out to the state, and then we have access to Bibliostat Connect and Collect, they're called. So just to give you an example of like the way that this can be used, I can compare to various other databases, various specific states. We'll check Virginia. Oh. This might be a short presentation after all.
That's on the other server, just so everyone knows, not on our side.
Okay. Wouldn't be a demo if it didn't blow up. So.
Well, let's check and see. Maybe that was just the Virginia version. Let's try one more time. Fingers crossed. Ah, here we go. So no problem. We can make a list though, which I've created a list here of Virginia's identified peer libraries. These names will look familiar to those that work on the 5-year plan. These are the libraries that JMRL compares ourselves to, and we frequently ask for this type of information from them. But now in one fell swoop, we can compare any of that data that I just mentioned. So here are all the categories that we went through. We can only do 1 year if we're looking at more than one library, but we could do that several times, of course. And I can also load saved lists of information. So for example, I've created lists that are kind of basic comparison information. So it's monetary mostly. What is their total expenditure on staff, their operating income, total number of full-time employees, how big is their collection, what's their total circulation, how many programs do they do, how many people came. And then very specifically for collection information, I could get a spreadsheet with, you know, these 20 very specific, how many books, how many ebooks, how many magazines, how many CDs. Same for circulation and for budget. Basically, any combination of that data that I was showing you that JMRL entered. Let's just do the basic one for now. And again, this is not current. This is not what we submitted in the fall for 2020. This is 2 years ago, really, for 2019. So I'm going to choose 2019. That's the soonest we have available. And you just get a quick chart, which you can also download into a spreadsheet so that you can manipulate it a little bit that has some comparison data there. with us, with JMRL and our peer libraries. You see the first category is program attendance in 2019, 102,000. So that's, you know, about in the middle here of what these other libraries are offering. Looks like the high point is Loudoun County with 370,000 attendees. Number of programs, a little under 3,000. You can see Loudoun's 10,000 programs. But 3,000 is pretty similar to some of our peers here. Number of paid staff full-time employees, just under 100 there. You can see that's a little low compared to some of our peer libraries here. You need some other data in order to make that happen, you know, how many branches and things like that, rather than just making a blanket statement, but all that's available here for us. What's the total circulation? Question?
Off the top of your head, is population data in here? Because it seems that only on a per capita basis would you be comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, there is some per capita. There's some per capita options, Mike. Not as much as I would like. We frequently take this and then put it back and forth with like Weldon Cooper's information.
Okay.
It'll be really up to date in the next few years with the census data, and then
Right.
you know, as you get farther away from that, it starts to fall off.
Okay.
Yes, you can get some per capita information there.
Well, if you just knew the service population
Mhm.
fundamentally, then you can compute per capita for any.
Yeah, we can figure that out pretty easily.
Okay, thanks.
So total holdings, how, you know, these are just examples of the types of information that we could share here. And you can look at the total expenditures on staff and the total operating income just to see like where budgetarily JMRL falls. It's in the middle of these things, like low, middle, basically of our peer libraries here. But as Mike mentioned, there's a lot of other factors there that are involved. Let's see, there might be one of these that had a full, per capita example. Yeah, here's a circulation per capita is one of the variables here, Mike, under the circulation one. And then I think there's another total operating income per capita. So that stuff is available. You just have to make your selections on what you want to see. I'm very wary of making people seasick by jumping around on a browser. So please, if I'm going too fast or too slow, let me know. But here you can see the total operating income per capita number. And JMRL is at 37.95, 37.95, which is, I think, fourth from the bottom of the list. So low middle on the list. Arlington's at the top. Okay, and then the other useful tool here is that I have to scoot this. We can look at national data by using a couple different databases here. The one that I find the most useful is this Plsc census data. And again, I have created a list that has JMRL's national peer libraries, which are the same ones that we use for our strategic planning here. So again, these library names might look familiar to some of you all because they're ones that we compare ourselves to in our strategic planning. There's not quite as granular data here available because, as I mentioned, you know, this data has to be normalized across the nation. So every state collects slightly different things, and they do their best to try to make them apples to apples. So you can see there's not quite as many choices, but again, I've got a few things that we look at that are pretty similar to the same things that we were just discussing for the state of Virginia. You'll notice right away that the years are 3 years behind. So because, you know, it's herding cats and it's getting national data across individual states on their timeline, you know, this one is perpetually going to be 2 years behind the state's bibliostat data. But again, just for a quick snapshot, you know, I guess I didn't put per capita in here, I meant to. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's the second and third categories here. You can say local government per capita. And again, JMRL's 3160. It's a few years ago, so that's why it's a different number. It also doesn't include, I think, the state share there. But you can take a look to see where that compares with these other library systems. nothing jumps out like the $60 plus that Arlington had. So you can see at some of our peer libraries across the nation, local support is lagging a bit what it is in Virginia at some of our better funded libraries. JMRL still is, kind of at the midpoint here of these libraries. So what can we use this data for? We can use it when we're talking to our jurisdictions about funding, for sure, about the needs of our communities, about the buildings themselves. So we can talk about full-time employee needs and how we're lagging a bit by our peers across the state. We can talk about square footage needs. You can do square footage per capita, I believe. We can check that our holdings are in line with our peer libraries. Same with programming. Are we offering the same volume? It doesn't give you any quantitative data about those programs. Did people like those programs? Did people learn things? What were the outcomes? But it does tell you how many in sheer volume our peer libraries are putting on. And then finally, of course, circulation. But that gets a little bit tricky. Tony will likely remember when JMRL switched the books on cassette. We had big cassettes and they each had one barcode in them. And when somebody came in to check out a book on cassette, each barcode got scanned. So if you got a hold of, one of those missioner books or something that had 50 little cassettes in it, that counted as 50 circulations at that time. So when JMRL decided many years ago to go to just one per, it took a hit on our circulation. The numbers went down because we weren't checking out 50 instead of one. So there is no guidance for standardizing and regulating those types of things across the state. It's just kind of informally amongst libraries talking to each other. So sometimes I have questions about circulation numbers that pop up when I look at some of the other libraries across the state. Not that they're doing anything wrong, it's just different from the way that we might be collecting it. Okay, I think that is about what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you mostly the tool that's available here. I was not aware of this for many years, even when I was in Josh's position as the head of IT and collections for JMRL. It wasn't until I saw the state library put something on at BLA a few years ago, I think Mike was in that session, that I realized that we had access to this. It wasn't clear to me that we had access to it, but we do, and trustees can get access to it as well. We can get a login for you all. So the main goal here today is to show you the tool in general. It's pretty user-friendly. It's a bit clunky at times, but the type of data you can get, what the issues are with it, and how we could potentially use it moving forward. Does anybody want to see anything while I'm logged in there, or can I stop screen share?
No, I could see how you could spend, endless hours, producing this stuff and then sorting through it and trying to come up with meaningful comparisons. A lot of stuff in there.
On the other hand, for specific questions, I think it could be incredibly useful for trustees as well as for library administrative planning.
I think
David,
you
where
can go on ahead.
Available, our report, where is that available to us?
I think I would have to email that out. As I was thinking about this, I don't think, we publicly post the audit. I'm not sure.
I've never seen it, so.
I believe it's available on the state's website. I can go get it there, but that's not very useful for you. So I'll send the copy out for the board so that you can have a look at the whole 65-page document.
I would be interested in just receiving that automatically every year when we file, once the PDF is compiled.
And Mike, that's usually not, we send all this stuff in October and then the state goes through, they look at it, they come back with questions and then they finalize. So it's usually January, February by the time.
So when it's done, whatever that means, yeah.
That's nice. It would be after we've gotten through our part of the budget, so. Another set of numbers.
Mhm.
I think that would be really helpful, David.
Great.
Some trustees will probably take more advantage of it than others, but I think for answering specific questions about the library, it could be incredibly useful for us.
I'll check on access as well. The last time I asked about trustee access, the state said that's fine. In terms of the comparative data, the Bibliostat Connect, the only issue would be a licensing one, I think.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else have any other questions, comments? Great. That was really useful, David. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad.
Moving on to new business. Mike, we have policy number 4.232, which has been presented and discussed twice already and should be here for the final reading and vote.
Yes, so you have we did present this at the last meeting for sort of a read through, and it's in your handouts packet. David, if you want to screen share that perhaps.
Sure.
Sort of as discussed last month, this is generally there's not really substantive new changes to the conduct items. It's sort of a rewrite in turn just to make it a little more user friendly. But otherwise, I don't think there's anything that's a major something new to really highlight, or something that's being added or removed that's super substantial. So I always, at this point, I always ask if we should read it. I don't know if we need to read it verbally, but or if people are prepared to make a motion to.
I think it's our responsibility to have read it because we were informed at the last meeting that
That's kind of how I think about it.
And there are no significant changes from the last reading that we did.
Yeah, from the reading, there have been no changes. Yeah.
Does anybody have any last minute comments or questions about this?
Nope.
Do I have a motion to accept this new policy?
So moved. Oh, Wendy had his question there, sorry.
Wendy, was that a question or?
It was to move to
Okay. So,
I'll second Wendy's motion then.
all right.
emotion or motion.
Unless there are concerns about this, I will take a voice vote on this. All in favor of accepting this new policy version, say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone?
Aye.
No. So this passes with more than a majority of the board. All right. Thanks very much, Mike. I know how much work you've been putting in on all of this. We'll move on to the committee reports and the working group reports. First of all, I will give you a brief update of the 5-year plan committee report. We did not have a chair because of the resignation in December. So Tony, Lisa, and I met with David and the staff who were on this committee virtually and discussed progress on aims that had been set to be completed either annually in fiscal year 2021 or in fiscal year 2022, which is this current year. And what we were basically assessing was progress. So I'll just go through this briefly. In goal number 1, access and outreach, we were informed that the addition of non-registration programming had been added to all of the branches now, and also an early literacy story time. So that is completed, and that's a wonderful thing. Yes.
No.
Okay. Underway and slightly delayed, but with an update expected by fall of 2021. We were going to be comparing service metrics using BiblioCommons data, the BiblioStat data that David just presented. And so I think that that's really important for us to get familiar with so that we can be conversant with that as we go forward. Also conducting a comprehensive review of the JMRL policy manual. That does not mean updating and changing it all. It means annotating it so that we know what needs to be changed and which things need to be scheduled for review. And then also developing a public engagement strategy for services and programs, including outreach to current non-users. With any luck, we should have a report from the folks who have been working on that on the staff by the fall. Underway, but with an unclear completion date, is using output and outcome data to provide and evaluate a range of programming services. Currently, this is going to be difficult to complete because of some personnel upheaval. Correct, David?
Yes, this is the responsibility of our reference and adult services manager, and that position is currently vacant.
Right. Although actively being pursued.
Yes.
So we won't know exactly how that's going to proceed until we have that person in place. And also assessing the feasibility of participation in the summer food program. I think that's going to depend on where the library system is as a whole as we get closer to the summertime. In terms of providing services, we're counting it as currently on hold. For goal number 2, technology, a new technology plan is currently in process. Remember, we do technology plans on a 3-year rather than a 5-year cycle. And so there is a new plan that is being developed and should be able to be presented to us fairly soon from a report from the technology committee and also from the technology staff in the library. Goal number 3 was for staffing. What's been completed to date is to update the staff training plan and to develop a customer service statement, which you all participated in with the staff in the fall. The third thing was to develop plans to encourage innovation by the staff. My understanding is that there is a program in place to encourage staff to submit suggestions for improving library services, but it's felt that it's suboptimal. And so it's going to be worked on again, but there is something currently in place. Underway, expecting a completion in April 2021 is a review of salary compression issues. Carla is really taking the lead on that. And a completion expected in fiscal year 22 is to revise the pay scale. And this is particularly with a nod to the minimum wage increases that we're expecting to come down the pike. To form customer service committees, to standardize regional customer service goals, to integrate customer service philosophy into the training manuals and staff assessments. That's a lot of work for the staff to do. And also to evaluate a need for the staff personnel manual, which Mike Powers currently has underway, and to create that manual as indicated. And he's going to be talking about the working group that is doing this just after I finish. Goal number 4 is the collection. Underway and completion expected in fiscal year 21 is updating the collection at Nelson Memorial Library now that the library space is open and available. Completion expected in fiscal year 22 to develop enhanced financial support of collection development plans, and that includes possibly fundraising. To purchase materials to support state SOLs as needed. That's going to require interaction with schools and various programs that mandate those things from the state level. To evaluate and update the English as second language learning materials that we have available in our libraries. To develop and implement a sustainable plan to enhance digital collection. And also to update and revise the collection management plan, although there is a very detailed plan that's currently in place. These things are really going to require a fair amount of work, and I think completing them by the end of fiscal year 22 is optimistic, but we'll keep our fingers crossed and as a board do whatever we can to support the staff that's working on these issues. Goal number 5, finance. Underway always is to work with the local jurisdictions, which we are currently doing now and which David will tell you about when he gives his report. With an unclear completion date, the 5-year plan had proposed to explore alternatives to out-of-area fees that are charged to non-resident patrons. That is currently on hold, given the state of how our library circulation is being managed right now, but it's something that is a perennial issue that comes up every year, and I think hopefully we can get a resolution to that. Also to develop and implement a fundraising plan, which is another really ambitious goal. And again, the board probably will have a big role to play in both developing and managing this sort of thing. Finally, goal number 6 was with regard to facilities. We've completed the expansion of the Nelson Memorial Library, and I hope you all have had a chance at least to see photographs of this. There's a new description of the library that's up on the Nelson Memorial web page now under JMRL, which is really exciting to see with some great pictures. Everyone has been really excited about having all of this space and the extra room for computers and a collection. With a completion date unclear is to develop a working group to advocate for a substantial renovation of the central library. And again, that probably is on hold until the budget situation resolves itself after the pandemic is over. Does anyone have any comments or questions for anyone who was on the committee that did this evaluation? I think, as David pointed out when we began our meeting, there's been a remarkable amount accomplished over the course of this year, given the trials and tribulations the library system has had to deal with. We still have a lot of work to do always, but that's never going to change. So I hope you're ready to tear into that as soon as we can really start meeting efficiently and getting library services back up and running. Okay. And then Mike Powers has an update on the Employee Handbook Working Group.
Okay, this working group is meeting approximately, we've been on a pretty much every 2 weeks type of pace. So I forget if we've met once or twice since the last board meeting. I think possibly only once, but at the last board meeting, we had finalized a fairly detailed list of topics to be covered and organize those into sections. And since then, David has sent that sort of finalized plan to the entire staff to gather feedback to see, hey, what did we miss? What are day-to-day, what things would you like to see written down in a consolidated place, to help you know how to do your job, or what your environment, employee-based environment is. And we got a few comments, not very many. So, so we've rolled those into, going forward. But in terms of the milestone of giving the full staff opportunity to sort of be involved in the process, that sort of has been accomplished. And we've started fleshing out we're going to go kind of section by section. So section 4 is workplace and professional conduct. In some ways, parts of this is just writing down practices that are already in place. Different branches, I think I'd mentioned, have already orientation materials or orientation outlines or checklists where various branch specific policies have been sort of communicated to employees, but now we're working to consolidate all of those and make them consistent across branches for the most part. But that's the section we're going to flesh out, sort of this section 4 first. And we're actually probably, I don't know, David, probably kind of 40% along the way. We're kind of halfway there already in terms of, getting some words on the paper, which then can be you always need that as a starting point for rewrites and so forth. The goal, but those are all kind of assigned out to authors, and that's moving along. Our goal is to have that, our goal is to have at least all of the topics filled out with some content by the managers meeting, which is April 13th. I think the second Tuesday is a monthly managers meeting. And so have that ready for them to, and really we need a couple of days before that. I was thinking today, David, for them to look at it in advance, but sort of hash out. There are some matters of opinion, let's say, between one branch and another that the managers are just going to have to, they'll hash out. one way or another. But we want to have that in place for them to look at that whole section by kind of that time frame. And then once we get those results from that discussion, we'll continue to finalize that section and then tackle other sections as we go. This, I think I'd mentioned possibly at our last board meeting, this is really shaping up to be what I would call an operational document. So it's aimed at the audience is the employee. Hey, what do I need to know as an employee, all written down in one place? Some of that is what I call backstopped by policy, either at a higher level, and some of it kind of isn't. Do you take a 15-minute break or a 30-minute break, or can you take your break at the beginning of the day or the end of the day? None of that is library policy. That's all, I would say, procedural level. But there are I think we're also uncovering some parts that do need to be sort of backstopped by in some cases, it might be a more legalistic type of document, since we are intersecting with HR topics, or a more kind of high-level principles from a policy level. So that, I think this will generate a few new policies, probably. I think it'll generate a review or tweaks to some existing policies. And then this is sort of hand in hand with reorganizing things that are in the current policy manual. Some of those I think can kind of go away or be moved to a kind of a personnel policy document, which might be separate from overall library. So the point being, that's going to happen in parallel. There is going to be work at the trustee level that comes out of this. In addition to, I would hope and expect when we're done that the trustees will probably on a sort of annual or every couple of year basis, just look at the whole operational document and sort of sign off and endorse it as it's written. But maybe that's a long-winded update of where we are with that.
Thanks, Mike. And Tony, you're also on this committee. Is that right?
That's correct.
I think we all owe both Mike and Tony a great deal of gratitude for taking this on and working so closely with the staff to make sure that we're all on the same page about what goes on in the library and how the library's run. It's a lot of work.
And staff is doing most of that, a lot of work, just again, to interject on that.
Yes?
I just wanted to say thanks to the staff who are so involved and all of their hard work, and definitely Michael and Tony. I greatly appreciate you putting in a lot of time on this. But thank you to the staff as well for, finally getting this organized and down on paper. I think that'll be helpful for the organization moving forward.
I think the staff that are involved, Carla, thank you for that, are very enthusiastic about getting some, there've just been little things here and there over the years where it's like, well, wait a minute, what do we do here? And where is that written down? And if the answer is nowhere, then now we're going to have a place for it. So we're all very excited.
Good. It's good to have a good working partnership between the trustees and the staff. Thanks, Mike. Now to old business, the COVID update.
Thank you. Just a brief update on where JMRL is and what the plan for the immediate future is. We are looking at an hours expansion in the beginning of April around National Library Week, which begins on the 5th. It's going to be in two separate chunks, some the beginning of the week on the 5th, some the beginning of the following week because of various staffing issues. But the goal here was to get branches as close to their operational hours as possible. We're not quite all the way there. We're missing some of the evening hours, but it's pretty close, just a few hours short in most locations. So look for expanded hours. Those are taking a variety of formats. I'll send you all a final document. There will be some times where one of the two main services right now might not be available in order to accommodate the other one because of staffing needs. But we are looking for an hours expansion in April. And then The goal is not to sacrifice any curbside service at this point, which is still in heavy demand, and not to sacrifice any virtual programming that's happening, which takes a lot of staff time, either away from the building or at least away from the public service desk. The EPC is working on the next steps on the other side of this. So this is the immediate step. We're working on what does it look like to be open more fully than we are now, talking to peer libraries across the state for best practices for increasing capacity. And we hope to have a plan within the next few weeks that we can start to talk to the board and staff about. Timing on that remains to be seen, depends on where we are as a region. In terms of vaccination, over 65% of staff have had both shots and are either fully immunized or they're waiting for their whatever the period is after the second shot. Over 75% have had at least one shot. So we're making really good progress, and the health department has been fantastic in working with JMRL. So for those participating, we are looking at full immunization by early to mid-April for library staff, which opens up a whole world of what we can then offer. The EPC did make a change to quarantine of library materials. We had been early on in the pandemic using the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences funded study called the REALM study. I'm not sure what the REALM stands for, but it's an acronym that basically tracked how long the virus could live on certain surfaces. Well, we were approached by the Virginia Department of Health last month that was working on a new document, guidance for libraries that they have since put out across the state, and it recommends either a 24-hour quarantine for materials or immediately cleaning them and getting them out shelf ready. We don't have the capacity to immediately clean everything and get it right out. So right now it's a 24-hour quarantine. We didn't make a big announcement about this because it doesn't really affect the user so much. You know, they return their materials when they think they're due, but it is moving materials through faster. So staff are really glad about that. And some of the space concerns that we have had because of the massive amount of quarantining are alleviated a little bit. I wised up this month and I have the statistics written down to show you ahead of time. So I'm gonna share my screen. It's the same major categories that I've been reporting on. Since July 1, JMRL's put on 448 virtual programs. Over 9,000 people have attended. That's July 1 of 2020. Circulation, July through the end of February, 705,000 items. Almost 200,000 of those have been digital. So that's up 44% for that same time frame in the previous year. Almost 30,000 new items have been ordered, cataloged, and processed. 43,000 people have signed on to use JMRL's Wi-Fi. 3,800 new library cards have been issued. Still, the majority of those are virtual, 3,390. 472 in person. So we're, as people are making appointments, they're making cards, but at a slower clip than digitally. 9,040 people have made appointments for Tier 3 in-building service since September, when we began in the outlying branches, through the 18th when I collected this data. You can see that the busiest is Crozet, continues to be. Northside is right behind them and is catching up. Crozet had a few months of a head start on Northside there. Steady usage at most other locations there. A lot of people coming to see the new Nelson Memorial Library because they want to see the beautiful renovation the county did. And over 1,000 people have been able to use in-building computer service since September. So we're tracking who's using computers versus other needs there. And you can see that's under 10%. Our assumption was that most of the use would be for people needing to physically get on a computer or use the library's hardwired network. And what we're finding is it's mostly browsing that people are coming in for at this point. Okay, so I can send those statistics out for the board to review. And are there any questions about the COVID response at this point and what the next steps are?
I have two. The first one involves the in-building computer use.
Mm-hmm.
One of the complaints that I had heard was that the 45-minute time period was not really long enough for a lot of people's needs. Is there any discussion of allowing computer users to go for longer periods of time in a confined space?
Yes, there is. It's on the agenda for discussion tomorrow at the EPC. This is one, we have not had a lot of critical comments about library service during the pandemic. You know, people have been very appreciative of what has been offered. But when we do, usually it has something to do with the length of time that people can be on the computer. So it's on the agenda for the EPC to discuss tomorrow. The confined space is not possible at all locations. You know, we have a few that have separate facilities there. But I think at this point, with the mitigation factors that we have in place and with the low numbers in the area, we can start to look at some.
Good. And the second question is, are we prepared for people to continue to demand curbside service when this is all over?
Well, yeah, and that has been heavily on my mind and staff as well, because as we all know, things have changed in the past year, and some things people are not going to want to go back to what they were doing before. So of course at Northside, we've got the drive up window, which will be operating as per usual. We've been in discussions with the city of Charlottesville about a CIP project at Gordon Avenue to add a drive up location there where the drop off window is now, but that's likely, you know, it's a CIP is years out. So yes, at this point, every branch has a plan to continue some form of curbside service, not just through our COVID response, but on the tail end of that as well. Likely it'll be a much smaller window. It'll be like, you know, Fridays from 3 to 5. If you want to do curbside, you can come pick up your things, or we don't have the specifics yet. We cannot do concurrent services like this forever, just because it's such a strain on staff. But I also understand, and I'm sure you all do, that this is going to be an expectation moving forward, and we should be able to offer some form of contactless pickup.
Thanks. Are there any other questions about where we stand with the COVID response?
Yeah, I have a question. So it's great to hear that we're at 70, it sounds like 75%, at least for the initial vaccination, or I would say that's 75% of staff that are in the pipeline, so to speak. And at the same time, we have 5 people in our buildings, some of which are small, but some of which are large. And that's far, far below the state guidelines in terms of public gatherings and businesses that operate and so forth. What is the emergency planning committee, have they identified any metrics? So I know we've talked about, you know, yes, we're going to move to more than 5 eventually. And when is that, you know, it's been sort of a, when it feels right is kind of my, you know, my takeaway is when it feels like the right thing, that's what we're going to do. Have we started to quantify that in terms of tying that to any metrics in terms of perhaps community vaccination rates or positivity rates is something we've used in the past for testing, or other state or health guidelines? Have we started to sort of quantify, hey, we'll be able to move to 10 people, for example, or to you know, 0.1 people per square foot, you know, if we wanted to tie it to the building size? Have we started to make some quantitative metrics that we would be able to tie this decision to going forward?
Well, the only one that we've been looking at, Mike, is the last one you mentioned, which is the capacity issues in terms of physical space, and trying to identify what the square footage is of usable public spaces in our buildings. And then the only metric that we've been given by the state is basically, you know, can people stay 6 feet away from each other? So it's a math problem of, you know, how many 6 feet squares can you fit in there? The EPC has not had a serious discussion about tying to a metric right now. You know, we've spent a year looking at data and making decisions to try and keep the community safe. So now the focus is starting to turn out a little bit. So I expect those discussions are going to be on the way. And I also have been telling staff that I expect, you know, knock on wood, I'm knocking on wood, things will happen quickly. They'll happen more quickly than they did the other way around, you know, when it was time to shut things down, because you know, once we hit these critical mass points, then the expectation of the public is going to change. They're gonna you know, expect things differently. And once more people are vaccinated in our community and schools are all back in session and whatnot, you know, we're going to start fielding different questions. So as I've said, the response has been very positive, and I don't expect that those would be negative interactions, but I expect that people would have those types of questions, why is it only 5 people when the building is X big? So yes, there's work to be done there.
In general, in terms of public expectations, if I think of one group of library users is kids, parents and kids, and they, during the summer, they don't have school, does that demand generally go up, or does it go down because does it go up, within that segment because kids are home and wanting to go to the library, or does it go down because people go on vacations and so forth? I'm curious what the.
Yeah, it goes way up. It's definitely the busiest time of the year in a normal non-pandemic setting. It's by far the busiest time of the year for the library. It starts to tail off in the end of August as people are getting back into school. But that's one of the things that we've been talking about is whether or not to try to tie the end of the summer semester into some sort of service if it's safe to do so.
Great. Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Yes.
Any other questions for David? Thanks. We'll look forward to hearing next steps. David also has some updates on the fiscal year 22 budget.
Yes, thank you. At this point, all of the jurisdictional administrative staff have submitted proposed budgets to their elected officials. All of the jurisdictions have proposed full funding for JMRL except for Charlottesville, which is proposing level funding for JMRL. So we are working with the city of Charlottesville on our requests, which is about $35,000 above level funding. That entirely goes towards cost of living, 2% cost of living increase that JMRL has been seeking. As you recall, staff had no cost of living increase for the current fiscal year 21. Charlottesville is working on this, I know, very hard on their own end for their own staff, where they also did not get a cost of living raise next year. It's the top unfunded priority of the council and of the city staff there. So I'm expecting to continue working with them in the weeks and the months to come. For the other jurisdictions, nobody has voted yet on a budget for next year, so there's still work to be done. But at this point, the documents are in the hands of the elected officials who will be making decisions about funding levels for JMRL moving forward. But so far, the news has been very encouraging and a lot of support from all 5 jurisdictions that make up JMRL.
Thank you. Do you want to just go ahead on into the library director's report, David?
Sure. Wendy stole a bunch of my thunder, but that's okay. Anything else to report, Wendy? I did want to give numbers on that same page event that Lisa moderated with Jacqueline Woodson last week. We had over 700 people viewing the event live. I got those from Jane Kulo on the Festival of the Week.
That's good.
That was a bit eye-opening. I sent that around the fact that it got listed in the New York Times, and we've been talking about the incredible reach of virtual programming and how our audience and our community is much wider than it was a year ago, and nothing said that more than 700 people coming to an event which we could never have hosted at the library. Even if we were to pick some of our largest partners to be physically in their space, it would be tough to get 700 people there. So I wanted to give the library board an update on the Centennial projects that are happening. 100 years of library service in Charlottesville. Lorenzo Dickerson's working on filming, has been doing so after hours at Central, getting some great stories about the history of JMRL. Kathy Johnson Harris was in for a close-up last week to be interviewed for this film. Lorenzo's hoping to be complete in July, so then we'll start working on plans to show it and how it's going to be distributed. JMRL's working with the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society on exhibit panels for the 3rd floor of Central about the 100-year history of library service in the area, the similar time frame earlier in the summer. We're going to have those up in the hallway across from the Swanson Case courtroom, but across from where the other art displays happen, basically, because this one's going to be semi-permanent, so people can see it. We mentioned when Marcy was talking about goals that the 5-year plan committee discussed the other day, one that came up was the $15 minimum wage, which is in the state law. It's a requirement coming up. JMRL's been working on that. Krista and Zach and I met again with HR at the city of Charlottesville to get specifics on their methodology. If you recall, JMRL used the county's algorithm for the last 3-year compression, decompression plan that we worked on. At any point, we're working on a plan to raise that minimum wage to $15 and address compression at the pay stages right above that to avoid leapfrogging of any salaries, so that a position would be paid more than the position that's above it in the pay scale. This likely will be too expensive for a 1-year change and will need to be phased in again. So the Personnel Committee will be talking about this, and then the Budget Committee in the late summer and fall will really need to look at what the overall numbers are and what we can reasonably try to afford on a year-by-year basis for the next few years. And then sadly, JMRL is going to be losing some members of our management team this spring. A couple names here. Catherine Purdue, our digital services coordinator, is moving on from her post as JMRL's first digital services coordinator and continuing her studies in grad school. Megan England is leaving her post as the Scottsville branch manager. Thomas, I'm not sure if you'd heard that or not, but Megan's going to be leaving at the end of April. And Jerry Carchidi, JMRL's business manager, is leaving to go hike the world in June. So we're going to sorely miss those folks. And we've known for a while, but the board's own reporter, Zach Weiser, is going to be leaving Virginia this summer as well. So 4 big shoes to fill for JMRL in the next few months there. And we'll miss all 4 greatly. And I will make sure that there's a way for the board to say goodbye. Normally we would throw some sort of celebration or party for each of those individuals, but we'll have to do it probably virtually by the mail. And I believe that's all I have to report, Marcy.
Thank you. Are there any other matters that board members would like to raise? I have one. As David pointed out, more and more of us are having an opportunity to become immunized against the coronavirus. And I hope that you all, if you are interested in doing that, have that opportunity soon if you haven't already. But I think it's time for us to think about what it's going to take to bring the board back together in an in-person meeting. We've soldiered on, I think, about as well as we could using Zoom. But it's difficult to deal with a lot of issues virtually. And I think that the board will be much more effective and efficient if we can get back to meeting in person. So I would very much appreciate it if each of you would send me an email in the next day or two and let me know what your stance is about this, where you are in terms of feeling that you're protected against the virus. And I'm hoping that we might even begin discussing having meetings in person in May before the end of the year, when we have David's review to do, which is one thing that's particularly difficult to handle virtually, just because of security issues. So if you will please do that for me, I will send an email to Lisa and ask her to respond. But I hope that you will be open to allowing us to arrange a good place for us to meet, where we can socially distance and yet still conduct our business soon. Are there any other issues that anyone would like to raise?
Yes, Marcia, I've begged my apologies to you and David and the board, but I've got to drive to Baltimore, so I'm gonna check out now.
Be safe.
I will.
Have a
Thank
good trip. Be careful.
I'm going to Baltimore, Wendy.
My best friends live in Baltimore.
Sometimes we can't
Hey,
really affect those things.
Excuse me.
My best friends. I go there often.
Anyone else? Future agenda items. I know we will be expecting to hear more from the Employee Handbook Working Group as they go forward. Carla, Personnel Committee reports. Can we expect those in April?
I think we probably will be able to meet by the April board meeting. And if not, then we definitely have to be on the agenda for May.
Okay. All right.
And technology.
And technology, of course.
And a policy committee meeting before the.
Exactly.
Before.
Right. So
Um,
there will be a policy committee report.
Marcy, there are two items that the board will need to address next month, the schedule of library closings and the schedule of fines and fees. So the fines and fees ones I'm expecting will be fairly static, but the schedule of library closings we'll need to look at. And hopefully have the board vote on next month, because I already got a question about the 4th of July is on a Sunday this year.
Okay.
How's that going to be handled? Probably it'll be Monday off, but the board needs to officially decide.
Are we going to get any of the money that is being allotted from the federal government?
No, Kathy, that's a great question, but both the first two rounds of the stimulus and the most recent round are going directly to jurisdictions. So JMRL is not going to see any direct payment there. Our hope is that the jurisdictions in getting that extra money and being able to use it on the projects that they need to will also be able to fully fund next year's library services. So indirectly, but no, we're not going to get any checks.
Thank you.
This looks like it's going to be a really full meeting in April. We'll just have to see how it shakes out in schedules. So I don't know about continuing education for the April meeting, but does anyone have any particular topics that they would like to have discussed before the board as continuing education? No.
Not yet.
If something does come to mind as you go through the work that you're doing, particularly you all on committees, would you please pass them along to David and CC me so that we can make sure that we're trying to make these as relevant to what you're actually working on as possible. Okay. Unless there are any other comments, I'm open to a motion to adjourn.
Am I on?
Wendy's.
I so
Wendy.
move. Oh, I'm on. I'm not on.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Well, then, unless I see you in a committee meeting, I will see you in April. Thank you.
Thank
Be
you all very
safe,
much.
everyone.
Take care.
Take
See
care.
you.